What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Commander Ad Populum. Together, we are Commander for the people, by the people, for the people. My name is Ryan. This is episode 37. Welcome to Studio CCO. I've moved the furniture around for a little upcoming project I've got on the go, so if I sound any different, it's because my voice is bouncing off things other than just the green screen. That being said, big thank you to FusionGamingOnline.com. They are the official sponsor for Commander Ad Populum. Couldn't make it happen without them. They are there for all of your gaming needs, and if you'd like to commission any altered art cards from myself, Fusion is a great place to get them because they ship to me usually within 3 business days. I know when I make an order with them, usually my order ships within a couple hours of when I hit the submit button. And if you do order from them, please leave a comment in the notes to them that Ryan from Commander Ad Populum recommended you. Really helps me out. A couple other big shout outs to Patreon supporters. New Patreon supporter, Patrick Healy. Thank you. Welcome to the Patreon, Discord, Commander Ad Populum family. It's great to have you. Huge shout out to Deezer Irons. Increased his pledge. That always means just as much to me as any new pledge does. So I can't say welcome because you're already here, but thank you just the same. If anybody out there listening would like to become a Patreon supporter, you can go to patreon.com/cadpopcast. Of course, link to that'll be in the show notes. Some great benefits there, of course. The Discord channel, discounts on altered art cards, altered art tutorials starting up here in the very near future. We've actually got, my wife and I actually have a road trip with our son planned. So as soon as that's kind of out of the way and I have some free time in the upcoming weeks to pop out some more tutorial videos, those will be on the Patreon page. It's kind of the only platform I have for Commander Ad Populum to launch those. So keep an eye out for those, of course, if you're into any of the altered art content. You can see that altered art content on the Commander Ad Populum Twitter page. That is at CadPopcast on Twitter. And of course, you can follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/Commander Ad Populum. You can see episode threads for this episode and many before it. And if you'd like to chime in with any of your own comments on today or any other episode's topics, you can do that. Feel free to give me a like, share, follow, whatever it is that helps everybody out there in the Commander community know that the show exists. And we do have a great community that is supportive and helps other people in the community, whether it be deck building like we're talking about today, or set retros, finding hidden gems. You know, we're going through my favorite block of all time. We're doing Planeshift today, and it's going to be great. That all being said, I want to jump right into today's community section. It's a little bit of a short one because I wanted to make a little bit more time for the technical section and, of course, the set retrospective section with Planeshift on the horizon. I wanted to talk about today our LGS, going out, supporting them. I don't think it's any secret to anybody that the local Magic store, the LGS, is falling by the wayside because it is so easy and so affordable to get your stuff online. And I just mentioned Fusion Gaming Online, so it seems like it's a little bit of I'm at odds with myself, but hear me out. FusionGamingOnline.com is actually Fusion Games in Winnipeg, Manitoba, a local gaming store that holds tournaments that I've been there, and it is a real game store. It's not just some online shop that you can't actually go to. They're a few hours down the road from me. They're not right in my own city, but there are multiple stores in Saskatoon where I live that do have alive and kicking and bustling metas and gaming nights. And I know that that's not the norm for every single person out there that plays Magic. People that live in remote communities or people that even live in urban communities whose local game stores are shutting down, because in an urban community, you might have like same day shipping or next day shipping with Amazon Prime. And it's just so much easier and faster and less hassle for you to just to be riding the bus or, you know, during your commute or at lunch break or when you're taking a bathroom break, just to order your cards. And within a day, they're at your house, and that's way more convenient than going down to your local game store. But let me tell you this, there is a certain nostalgia factor that you get when going to a local gaming store. There is a certain experience that you get when you go out to a Friday night Magic to play Commander with people. You meet new people. I met a guy the other night Never seen him before in my whole life. His name was Ryan too, which was totally cool. We were twice as cool as anybody else at the table because there was 2 guys named Ryan, of course. He's playing a Yawgmoth deck, so I was kind of trying to get under his skin a little bit about like, oh, you're just going to combo us, or you're just going to do the big black mana thing and exsanguinate us. And he's like, yeah, I got combos in here, but no tutors. Yeah, I got some mana, but no big payoffs, right? So I'm thinking, okay, I'm playing like a 2 out of 10 deck. And I'm playing with a couple other guys that I've played with at the shop a few times. And we ended up having an amazing game just because I trusted some random guy because he showed up to the same shop that I do. He was familiar with a couple of the other people around the shop. The people that I've played with in the past kind of knew what to expect when they were playing me. And we have this little bit of a community that we leaned into to make sure that everybody was gonna have a good time. And I know Rule Zero exists and we should be talking to each other about power level and play experience, expectations, that whole decorum. But even if you discount that there was a complete stranger to me in our pod, the other 2 players that were playing along with me and this stranger, Ryan, knew the experience that we all wanted to have, the fun one that the store is known for. And because of the 3 of us kind of projecting that positive play experience, fun atmosphere onto this 3rd player, he fit right in. He had a good time, and his deck was like right on par with where we were, even though he said his deck was powerful and had the big black mana and tutors and combos, and I said mine was a 2 out of 10. Together, the 4 of us played a game in such a way that it was pretty much down to the wire, even keeled the whole way. And let me tell you, it was like a 3-hour game. It was probably the longest game of Magic I've played in the last year and a half. And it came down to me and the one other guy. His name's Brandon. Shout out to Brandon if he's listening. He was playing new Kozilek. Him and I were the last 2 guys. I Vandal Blasted him, blew out all his everything, but then he landed his commander, drew some cards, played an Ulamog, played a Bane of Balaget or something else that had Annihilator, and he started annihilating me, and I ended up sacrificing all of my non-basics, hoping each turn that I could draw into that Price of Progress that deals 2 damage to each player for each non-basic they control. At this point, I had no non-basics because I was sacrificing all of my non-basics, and he had 10 non-basics and was at 16. And I gave myself the opportunity 3 turns in a row to survive just by blocking, sacrificing lands to his Annihilator triggers. I gave myself 3 turns to try and draw a tutor or a draw spell or just flat out the Price of Progress to just dome him for 20. And I didn't get there. Unfortunately, after the 3-hour game, I would have loved to top deck the exact answer and win. But even a loss, even getting second, was totally fine because we had the funnest game of the year so far for me and the longest, most interactive game I've probably played in the last calendar year. So totally fun, totally awesome. Wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't a local gaming store experience at my disposal. So the long and the short of it is, if you are able to, put out a little bit more effort than just logging on to XYZ store online or Amazon or big box store and get out to your local gaming store. It'll help keep that portion of the industry alive. You'll probably see some stuff that you haven't seen, a product this or singles that, what have you. And if you have the opportunity to go to an F&M, you'll have a great time. On to today's technical section, just after this. So I get asked via Twitter, email, physical face-to-face conversations frequently about my deck building process, my inspiration. What do I think about this? A list comes in via email. Hey, take a look. What do you think? Cuts, includes, hidden gems, etc. I wanted to have an episode of Commander Ad Populum that I could a little bit point to indulge some of these requests and divulge some of my, not secrets, but some of how I do it. I build a ton of decks, even if not physically or in a digital space. I theorize, these cards all go together in deck. It would be good. This commander can be used this way. Couple quick examples. I have an Animar Soul of Elements deck. It is a CEDH deck. It is very tuned. It has every bell and whistle possible. But there's also the Animorphs list, the list that runs a whole bunch of morph cards, because when you cast them face down, once Animar has 3 counters on it, you just cast them for free. You have access to teamer colors, red, blue, green, and that gives you access to things like mana producing elves or what have you that you can flip your morphers up with, and it's a thing, right? And I've done that. And another thing that I've done is having like a swap out kind of commander, right, where you denote inside your sleeve with a little piece of paper, or in my case, like my Animar deck is all painted, and the cards that I wanted to swap out were in the same box, but they're all foiled. So I would swap out, if I wanted to switch from Animar to Maelstrom Wanderer, this is years ago, Maelstrom Wanderer, I just swap in all of the foil cards and take out all of the painted cards that had like a little slip in their sleeve saying, switch it out. And that gave me access to 2 or 3 different variations on the same commander, of which I liked, whatever the color combination for or the ability suite that it had. And it gave the people that I played against a varied gameplay experience when they play against me, which in my mind, it's a win-win-win. Despite me playing Animar or Maelstrom Wanderer, it's a win-win because I can switch it up and play something different. I can tone the power level of my deck back. I can scale it up with the Maelstrom Wanderer. Maybe it has lots of clones and stuff that you can cascade into, and then you kind of just get the luck of the draw when you cascade into a clone card and clone whatever your opponents are playing, right? Scales very well with the power level of the meta. So I think it's important to theorize about these things and experiment with building and go outside of what the norm is. And I'm going to go into a little bit of how I do that. And you have to understand the threshold for me building a deck these days after playing Commander for, I'm going to say, a decade or more, and the amount of decks I've built and the amount of decks I currently have, the amount of real estate in my carrying case that I carry all my decks in on a regular basis, the threshold for me to build something new is very high. That's why I say I'll build them in a digital space or I'll theorize about them frequently. One of the ways people do it, myself included, is new commander is previewed or revealed, and they start to see online, or they start to think in their own head, hey, I have this card, it goes good with this, or hey, I saw somebody post about this on Facebook or Twitter, that's a great combo, I'd love to build around it, or there's a bunch of things that go good with that, it does this, it opens up this build space. I do it like that sometimes. Generally though, now I might see a card that fits into the 99 and I'll build around maybe that card or that ability or that thing that I want to do. The most contemporary example for me is my Persistent Petitioners Pramicon Jeskai Control Mill deck. When you go online anywhere, you Google, you look up, you EDH rec, Persistent Petitioners. You can play any number of them in your deck. They're a 1/3 advisor for 2 mana, blue 1. You can pay 1, tap it to mill a player, any player. Or you can tap 4 advisors you can control to mill any player, 12 cards. When you look at those lists, you see them in Phoenix lists that already want to mill. You see them in Dimir, where they're already doing the mill things. You get access to black. You can mass reanimate a bunch of things or a bunch of petitioners after you mill yourself a whole bunch. That's all cool. That's all fine. But I wanted to play Pramicon. Jeskai 1/5 flying defender, enters the battlefield, choose left or right. Your opponents can't attack that direction. So you're shutting off 2 other players and only 1 player can attack you. You just pick the person who can attack you the least or the least effectively. So at this point, I have a strategy in mind that I want to enact. That is the Persistent Petitioners mill. I'm not sure at this point if I want to mill myself or if I want to mill my opponent. Generally, milling ourselves can be considered good if we're playing something that reanimates or when we want to have stuff in our graveyard. That's great. And milling your opponent traditionally is bad. So to make it more challenging for myself, because I'm already not playing black, the color that cares about our own graveyard, I want to mill my opponent. Okay, so at this point I'm thinking this deck isn't going to win fast unless I try and combo with these petitioners. But of late I haven't wanted to combo because that just feels easy and it feels cheap and it would be not very difficult to just add some combo pieces in blue that let me continuously untap. Like Dramatic Reversal Isochron Scepter, or something like Intruder Alarm, where I can just cast 2 or 3 creatures in the same turn consecutively to continue to untap my 4 advisors to mill my opponent for, instead of 12 per turn, it might be 48 or 60 per turn, which is a substantial amount of mill. I mean, you can mill an opponent out in 2 turns, really, which, say what you want, like that's probably faster than attacking unless you have your win condition like your Crater Hoof or your Insurrection or what have you in green or red. So I want to mill my opponent. How am I going to survive until the late game? And that's a little bit of what drives my decision-making process for the rest of the deck. I know I need, between 25 and 30 Persistent Petitioners to have a density enough that I'm going to draw 4 of them. And then, there's going to be a sweeper effect, so I'm going to need 4 more. Do I need any other advisors? Currently, I'm playing 2. I'm playing a Grand Arbiter, Augustine IV, and I'm playing some guy from Return to Ravnica block. Your opponents can put +1/+1 counters on their creatures, but then they can't attack me. So it's a little bit of a control card that lets them attack each other for more profit, and it keeps them away from me. What else can I add that does that? What else is going to keep opponents from attacking me? Well, maybe Propaganda, Ghostly Prison, Sphere of Protection, these kinds of things. Okay, well, what shuts off attacks like Full Stop? Peacekeeper. It's a creature from Mirage or Visions or something. You got to pay white 1 during your upkeep or else you sacrifice it, but it just says full stop. Creatures can't attack. It costs white 1 or white 2 or something. So that goes in, right? In case somebody casts something that destroys all enchantments and I still have this creature that says creatures can't attack. And that is on top of Pramicon that's wanting to do these kinds of things anyways, right? If only one player can attack me and that person does actually develop a board enough that they can harm me in some meaningful way, I want some backup in those enchantments that are harder to kill that are going to protect me. So now we're getting a little bit of the picture of, okay, the commander is in there to protect me. Things that aren't my 25 card win condition, which is terrible, are there to protect me. How do I find more of those things without, playing just the Ponders, the Preordains, the Brainstorms, the things that are not very good unless you're playing CEDH, which I'm clearly not. And what do I put in there that isn't just the regular, bland divination things, right? Well, instead of adding card draw spells in there to further my game and to draw attention to, my 6, 7, 8, 9 card hand, why don't I put some kind of fog effects in there, some counter spells that can't be countered, some counter spell draw cards to further stop my opponents from harming me, but at the same time not stop them from playing the game. And you do that in such a way where you just say, look, if you come at me, or if you cast that, or if you do this, it's just not going to resolve. You're going to be wasting your time. You're going to be wasting everybody's time. You can put it like that from a political sense. In a game, you're going to be wasting your mana. It'll be a wasted attack. That creature will die. You just make very pointed and upfront and abrupt statements, and that is going to be your card draw. And I'm telling you, I don't want to call it next level, but I feel like I've made a breakthrough when I started to build decks like this, where you can build a deck whichever way you want, and then you just have to a little bit learn how to politic it. And you can listen to content creators talk about politics every which way from Sunday as kind of catch-all episodes, but I think my breakthrough with this Pramicon deck in particular has been that every deck has a specific way that it wants to be politicked with. And the last few decks that I've built have all involved me doing what I want to do with subpar cards or off the beaten path cards, and just politicking in a way that is specific to that deck. My Hogak deck is like that. My Pramicon deck is like that. My Elenda the Duskrose deck is like that. Last week I'd mentioned that I'm going to start doing deck techs. When that starts to happen, maybe I'll tech some of those first to kind of work all the kinks and the bugs out and give everybody a little bit of a taste of what the deck techs are going to be like. But the point for this technical section is I pick a strategy that I want to use and I pick a commander that I want to use. They don't necessarily need to be linked. They don't necessarily need to be the traditional ways that you want to that people use them. You just pick them and then you build. And you have to find the way that you're going to draw cards with it. For me, it's by just having the game go longer and not dying because I've put in a ton of cards that let me not die. And yeah, it makes for 2 and 3 hour games, but to me, those are fun games. That's not for everybody. I will, public service announcement, those games aren't for everybody, but for me, I like them. For me, it's about the social interaction when, you almost get to know somebody from their soul outwards when you play these long games because you spend so much time and you see so much about their thought process and their build process and how they play the game. And it a little bit lets you know the person through their Magic deck when you can play these games. And for myself, again, playing for 10 plus years, have built hundreds of different decks. That's what the game is about for me now, is the interaction with the players through politicking my deck. So pick a strategy, pick a commander, find ways to draw cards, find ways to make extra mana, and that might just be by playing 2 hour games like I do. Next week, we're going to talk about, once we've got our card draw spells and our strategy and our commander, how do we make it all jive? How do we build our mana base? And what are some of the examples that I've used with my Pramicon deck for political purposes? So that's all I'm going to say about it today. I hope everybody enjoyed that technical section. I know it's kind of ethereal and it's kind of personalized to me, but I think there's enough in there that people can kind of take what they want and formulate their own opinion on how they build decks. Maybe you let me know on Twitter or on the Facebook thread for episode 37. Until next week when we touch it again, we're moving on to the set retro. Today, Planeshift. Just after this. Planeshift. This is the second set in the Invasion block, released February 2001. This is the 22nd Magic expansion in history. Great set. This is kind of my second set that I was like playing Magic for. If anybody listened to the Invasion set retro from last week on episode 36, you'll know how enthused I am for this entire block because it's dripping with flavor in the cards, the story, the whole nine. It's great. 143 cards in this set. It was big, small, small. So this one is 143. Apocalypse next week is 143 cards as well. From a story perspective, the Invasion, full swing. The good guys, we're going to call Urza the good guy here because the Phyrexians in the story were obviously bad. They were invading Dominaria. It's in full swing. The good guys are losing. And Planeshift is when portions of Wrath, the portions where all the army was standing, are starting to kind of overlay or phase into Dominaria. And when they overlay onto Dominaria, the whole Phyrexian army shows up like just bang, all at once. So things are going to go down. Real quick, some of the cycles, because we always look at the cycles, it kind of gives us an idea of what they're trying to promote in the set. We've got more kicker spells. We've got pictures of all of they're called Planeswalker enchantments. They were Planeswalker's Mirth, Mischief, Scorn, Fury, and Favor. And they had pictures of, in the same order, Commodore Guff, Bolivar, or Bolivar, however you want to say it, Tevis Zat, Windgrace, and Freyalise. And I think Windgrace and Freyalise we both have cards for at this time, but the other three we don't. These were enchantments that did something. They had an activated ability, and they were to symbolize the characters in the story that are helping Urza go into Phyrexia and mess stuff up. So those are cool cards. We had creatures that bounced themselves when they entered the battlefield. So they were 2-color creatures. When they entered the battlefield, you bounce a creature of that color. And the one of note was Cavern Harpy, because you could play it, it would enter the battlefield and you'd bounce a black or blue creature, and it was black and blue. And you could also pay 1 life and return it to its owner's hand as well. So there was some combos with this. You can still do them in Commander where something enters the battlefield and you gain a life, and then you use that life to bounce the Cavern Harpy. So there's combos with that. It's fine. There's charms to go, like 3-color charms to go along with the dragon cards that we saw from Invasion last week. And these were the first instance of 3-color charms. Of course, we've got the shard charms now and the wedge charms from Khans of Tarkir. But these were the original, like Treva's charm, Dromar's charm, Krosa's charm, Derga's charm, Rith charm. Those were the original 3-color charms. They were in Planeshift, and they've seen reprints in several Commander products, so some of them are good. I'm not going to go into them because there's 5 of them, but some of them are good. I mean, if you want to build that 5-color charms deck or whatever, these are going to make it. The 3-color prefix word before it was a shard or a wedge names are back in Sunscape, Stormscape, Nightscape, blah, 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 right? And there was familiars in Planeshift that the center color, let's say it's white for Sunscape, gives you a discount on spells that are green and blue, right? The black one gave you a discount on spells that were blue and red, right? So if you're playing Grixis, you'd want to run Nightscape Familiar. So lots of cycles. The final one I want to talk about is a cycle of uncommon lands, and these were the layer lands. These represent kind of where the primeval dragons, those 3-color dragons, where they live. And essentially they enter the battlefield. You have to return a non-layer land, so literally any other land you control, to your hand. And then these just give you 3 colors of the appropriate shard color combination that you're in. So Daragaz's Cauldra is the Jund colored one. When it enters the battlefield, return a non-layer land you control to your hand, and it taps to give you black, red, or green. And that's it. Doesn't come into play tap, doesn't do anything, it just gives you Jund colors at the cost of bouncing a land. And who knows, maybe you have a Bojuka Bog, maybe you have a Khalni Heart, or a Khalni, the one that gives you a plant token, right? Maybe you've got the red one that buffs a person, or buffs a creature when it enters the battlefield. Maybe you want to bounce a land. Maybe you've got your Gaia's Cradle tapped for 10, and you've got an Azusa Lost But Seeking. You play your Daragaz's Cauldra, bounce your Gaia's Cradle, and play it again, tap it for 10 again. Now you got 20, right? There's reasons that you'd want to return lands to your hand, and if you can attach that to a 3-color land that enters the battlefield untapped, I think there's reason to look at these. Now, before we get into the set proper, of course, we want to take a quick look at the legendary creatures in the set. In Planeshift, there were 3. We've got a returning character in Urte the Corrupted. Last we saw him, he was Wizard Adapt, and he was mono blue. This time, he's blue, black, white. And 2, for a 3/4, you can play blue and tap him, sacrifice a creature or enchantment, counter target spell. So if you're playing white and black, there would be reasons that you would want to sacrifice creatures and enchantments. Maybe you've got Replenish in the deck. Maybe you've got some Mass Reanimation in the deck. Maybe you've got every single creature and enchantment in white, blue, black is an enchantment creature, like from Theros or our now Return to Theros Beyond Death. Maybe everything that you sacrifice is a creature and an enchantment, and you can just sacrifice it to counter any spell you want. That sounds like the build method that I was just talking about. So if you've got a list like that, get at me. Next up is Tahngarth, Talarum Hero. This is a 4/4 for red 3. He's a Minotaur warrior or whatever. He's got vigilance, and you tap red 1, tap him, and he fights something. So this is our first instance of Tahngarth. And we, of course, had a reprint of him in Commander 2019 or whatever. A 4/4 vigilance for 5 that fights. Relatively underpowered as far as legendary creatures go. So I don't think that this guy fits into any red build anywhere other than maybe the 5-color Captain Sisay Weatherlight Crew flavor deck. So that's fine. He's a character. You can build it. Next up, Nemada Grove Guardian. If Verdaloth the Ancient was the father of all saplings, in my 6th grade brain from last week's set retro, Nemada Grove Guardian would have been the mother. And I don't know if they're male or female or if they have those genders or whatever, but that's what 6th grade Ryan thought. Anyways, 4/5 for green 4. You can go green 2, put a 1/1 sapling creature token onto the battlefield, and you can just do that as many times as you want. And you can sacrifice a sapling to give all other saplings +1/+1 until end of turn. This card is in green token decks, in particular green sapling decks. This card is a dedicated win condition. You could just make a ton of saplings if you have lots of mana. You can sacrifice a ton of them to give all the other ones plus whatever. This is a win condition in your Saproling deck. And every time I read it and think about it and theorize about it like I do in my build method like I just talked about, I always want to make another Saproling deck. It was kind of one of my first tuned, fun, good decks when I was playing casually. And say what you want, like Saprolings aren't good or whatever, but it was fun for me. Onto the set proper, we have got a whole ton of good commander cards. I'm going to stick to the ones that I think might be underplayed gems, and if any of them are format staples, maybe I'll just mention them. First up, first card in the set, Aura Blast. This is a destroy target enchantment instant for white 1, and you can also draw a card when you cast it. So it's half a disenchant, but it replaces itself. So if that is the kind of card that you want to run, maybe look at Aura Blast. Orum's Chant was in this deck, and this is the kind of card that might go alongside the Fogs or the new one that ends combat from Commander 19. This is Orum's Chant. It is an instant. Target player can't cast spells this turn, and if you paid the kicker of white, which is an additional cost when you cast the spell, creatures can't attack this turn either. So white is creatures can't attack, and the player can't cast spells this turn. So powerful card. This was for a long time back in the day. This is what you put on your Isochron Scepter, because Isochron Scepter casts the Orum's Chant. You can still pay the kicker, and you can just lock opponents out. Cool card. First up of the familiar cycle is the Sunscape Familiar. 0/4 wall, green spells and blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So I'm not going to go into all of those, but there is a cycle: Sunscape, Stormscape, Thunderscape, etc. Planeshift, being in the second set of the Invasion block, cared about how many basic land types you have, just like Invasion did, and there was Allied Strategies. This was a sorcery for blue 4. Target player draws a card for each basic land type among lands they control. So this was a 5-mana draw 5 when you cast it. Like, if you have a 5-color deck and you want to pay 5 to draw 5, this will do it for you. There's a card called Planar Overlay, and this is the opposite. This is meant to hose the 5-color deck. So if you have a ton of 5-color decks kicking around your meta, you can cast a Planar Overlay for blue 2. It's an instant. Each player chooses a land they control for each basic land type. Return those lands to their owner's hand. So if I'm playing mono blue, the only basic land type I have is island. I would choose my island and return it to my hand. If you're playing 5-color, you have to choose a plains, an island, a swamp, a mountain, and a forest, and you have to return those. Next up is an enchantment called Shifting Sky. Blue 2, enters the battlefield, choose a color. All non-land permanents are that color. So that is a very interesting card when, let's say, your commander has protection from a chosen color, or when your commander has protection from all colors, for example. You can just make everything, including artifacts, the chosen color. I've seen Sunken Hope do some work in cards that want to bounce, like Eternal Witnesses or Auramancers or whatever, or Archaeomancers to their hand, and it's an enchantment for blue 3. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player returns a creature they control to their owner's hand. So if you're just going to continuously bounce each opponent's one creature, that might not be giving them incidental enter the battlefield value, but we have a deck chock full of enter the battlefield value creatures like the Eternal Witness. We can do some work with Sunken Hope. Moving on to black, Planeshift was the first set that Diabolic Intent was printed. Additional cost, sack a creature for sorcery, black 1, search your library for any card, put it into your hand. So this was Demonic Tutor, also sacrifice a creature. So that was a mighty card. First printing ever for Lord of the Undead as well. This is a zombie lord. All zombies get +1/+1 for black 1, and you can go black 1, tap, return a zombie from your graveyard to your hand. So it's recursion and a zombie lord. This is a very, very good card. Still sees play today. It was reprinted like in 8th edition or 9th edition or something, and maybe again in 10th, just because they did like zombie tribal in Onslaught a couple years after Invasion. So this card saw a reprint. Cool card. There were cycles of cards at common and uncommon as well that did something to the opposite side of the color wheel. For example, Slay is an instant for black 2, destroy target green creature. It can't be regenerated, fine. And also draw a card. So if you've got, usually in a game, there might be a creature that is green that you want to kill. If you also maybe want to pay an extra mana premium on top of your terror effect or your Doomblade effect for you kids out there, you can draw a card. Doesn't see a ton of play. 3 mana removal spells are a lot better when you think of things like Anguished Unmaking or Vindicate or Putrefy, Mortify, etc. But this one draws you a card. Might not be the kind of thing that you want to overlook, because if you can get the same thing you were going to get with that Vindicate and draw a card, might be worth a slot. The same is true for the card Implode. If you're going to run Stone Rain to get rid of those problematic Vesuvas, Thespian Stages, Dark Depths, Gaia's Cradles, what have you, Implode is a sorcery for red 4, destroy target land. There's that 1 mana premium again on top of Stone Rain, or 2 mana premium, on top of Stone Rain. Draw a card in red. Not very often do you see draw a card on red. I thought that was worth mentioning because maybe if you're going to run Stone Rain or things of that ilk, you might want that 1 or 2 mana premium to draw a card. Again, just because it's in red. The Planeswalker enchantment card in Planeshift that I think saw the most play, and I've seen play in Commander more recently. I think I saw it played in Vegas or last year in Vegas or something. Is Planeswalker's Fury. It's red 2 enchantment. It's got an activated ability for red 3. Target opponent reveals a card at random from their hand. Planeswalker's Fury deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to that player. So late game, when they only have their bombs left in their hand, you might get them for 5 or 6. Or if you combine this with blue or some other way to mass bounce everything, or sometime when you know what's in their hand, maybe it's just one card. Maybe they've played out their entire hand and they drop their Blightsteel and you can bounce it and then activate your Planeswalker's Fury. They're going to take 12. Now that's best case scenario, but again, this card, when you know what's in your opponent's hand, gets a lot better. Or when they have one card in their hand, if you want to pair this with like mass discard effects with like in a Rakdos deck maybe, as opposed to an Izzet deck that's going to bounce stuff. Just a thought. First green card I want to talk about, Gaia's Herald. This is an elf. First of all, people sometimes forget that. A 1/1 elf for green 1. Creature spells can't be countered. Straight up. And that is all creatures, not just ours, everybody's. We probably don't care about countering creatures, but if the counter everything decks exist in your meta, maybe a Gaia's Herald. I know I play it in Animar. I've contemplated playing it in my Hogak deck, A, because it's an elf ball deck, B, because if I'm exiling a bunch of my cards from my graveyard in my Hogak deck, I want to land Hogak out of my graveyard, right? This also works on gods, because remember, when you're casting it and it's on the stack, it is a creature spell, even if you don't have the devotion once it enters the battlefield. So contemporary example of where this card might be good, given that we're just going to be getting a bunch of new gods at the end of the month here. There's a little card it's always interested me, and I know that Become Immense exists, but how about Gaia's Might? This is an instant for green. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each basic land type among the lands you control. So that could be a +5/+5. I don't know where you'd put that. I don't know if 5-color Infect decks exist, but it seems like a cool little card. I don't know. Lots of Kavus in, I don't think I mentioned that last week in Invasion, but this was the set that Kavus were introduced to Magic. They were like grown in the Yavimaya forest deep underground, and when the invasion came, the ground cracked open and they all started killing Phyrexians, right? And they were reintroduced, I believe, in Time Spiral block. So there are probably a critical mass of Kavus. They are underpowered. They were designed for limited, but if you are one of those, let's make a funky tribe type deck builder, Kavus might be your jam, and they were seen all over the invasion block. Destructive Flow, that is a kind of a mass land destroying enchantment. It's in Jund colors, so it fits into your Vivictus Asmodi land destruction deck, if that's you, or your Destroy Gaia's Cradle deck, if that's you. If you're playing Rakdos Goblins, you've got Dralnu's Crusade, gives all your goblins a buff. Eladamri's Call is a green-white instant. Remember that it's an instant. Search for a creature card, put it into your hand. So this is the original printing of Eladamri's Call, which has been reprinted a couple times, but this is where it was first. Hull Breach is here, destroys artifacts, enchantment, or artifact and enchantment for the mere cost of red-green. Meddling Mage, of official first printing as well. You can just blank somebody's commander. When you cast Meddling Mage, when it enters the battlefield, you choose a non-land card and the named card can't be played. I know that this was a modern thing for a while because it's a human wizard, goes in human decks or whatever, but it also goes in Azorius decks that you just want to blank a card in. Maybe a combo piece, they land their Karn, you name Mycosynth Lattice. Maybe they land their combo piece, they're trying to cast their commander or vice versa. You can just name the opposite end of the combo with Meddling Mage. There's Phyrexian Tyranny in here as well. This is just straight up enchantment for Grixis colors. Whenever a player draws a card, they lose 2 life unless they pay 2 mana. This is a staple in Nekuzar decks, I think, but it could just go in any Grixis deck, and it's going to do some work because people aren't going to want to pay 2 on top of, you're already playing Rhystic Study if you're playing blue, and it's just going to punish them for drawing cards, and the Commander players want to do that. So cool little card there. Original printing for Terminate was in Planeshift. If you don't play Terminate in your Rakdos colored decks, it's an instant for black-red. Destroy target creature, can't be regenerated. It's one of the best, most efficient ways to get rid of a creature. 2 colored pips, but you are just going to get rid of any creature you want, and it can't be regenerated, which isn't that relevant, but some creatures do regenerate, and Asceticism is a card which lets its controller regenerate any creature they want. So keep that in mind if you're Rakdosing and you want to kill creatures. Last couple cards, land cards, then we're going to get out of here. We've got Meteor Crater. This is a non-basic land. You tap it, choose a color of a permanent you control, and it'll give you a mana of that color. So it doesn't really fix you because you already have to have a permanent, but I've seen this in 5-color decks that run things like Transguild Carrier and Fusion Elemental that are all 5 colors, so this becomes a 5-color land. Of course, the layer lands that I had said from at the top of the show, and of course, Terminal Moraine. Sure. This was what we used before Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds. So this is taps, add a colorless to your mana pool. So automatically it kind of is better at face value because you can just get a colorless from it right off the bat. But if you need a colored from it, you can go 2, tap, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle your library. So later on in the game, you can crack it, pay 2, and you can get yourself a basic. This can go in colorless decks as well because it gives you colorless, and you can now find a waste with it. So not to be overlooked, I don't know if it's any good other than in colorless decks, and we have enough colorless lands now that we can probably get away without running it, but it's worth note just because it's kind of what we used before Terramorphic and Evolving Wilds. So that's Planeshift. Let me know what you think. I love the set. I remember when it was released and following the story online. Man, I remember reading these novels. They were great. They were cool. They were fun. And they were a very pivotal part in Magic history, kind of like the War of the Spark at the end of the Ravnica, Super Friends, Gatewatch story arc that we had last year. So kind of reminiscent of that for me when we were going through all that last year. And that's it. Big thank you to FusionGamingOnline.com, of course, for all of your Planeshift needs. Remember, support your local gaming store, your LGS, whether that's Fusion Games or otherwise. It's important to keep those shops afloat, give them your support both in stores, FNMs, pre-releases, products, sleeves, deck boxes, cards, singles, that whole jazz. Huge thank you to all of the Patreon supporters, new and old, patreon.com/CADPopcast. Great benefits there, including discounts on altered art, cards done by myself. Get at me on Twitter, Facebook, or cadpopcast@gmail.com if you're interested in alters. If you're interested in the show, you want to submit your own show topic, your community topic, or otherwise. And of course, we're only a few patrons away from that stretch goal of a deck tech per week. So if you want to hear me go deep on your deck, my deck, or otherwise, jump on over to Patreon, share the show with a friend. Maybe they would like to support, maybe they like to listen, maybe they are sharers of the show just like you. That does help out, and I do appreciate that just as much. And that's it, everybody, until next week, where we conclude Invasion Block and we take a look a little bit deeper on my build process, how I start to kind of mold the pile of cards into a deck, so to speak. That's all I've got for you this week, everybody. I will see you next Wednesday.